Let me give you a quick introduction to this first session of the summit. Jonah Sachs will be the first person to talk. Jonah is an expert on storytelling, a master storyteller. I'm a great fan of something that he did, which I'm sure he's going to be talking about, called The Matrix. And he's going to be followed by James. James Alexander, the business that he founded is an amazing example of how in today's world consumers can connect directly with each other. Peer-to-peer business, which is quite a remarkable example that James will be talking about. Mike Welsh. Mike Welsh is the author of Futuretainment. Great visionary in terms of what's happening in the world today. And finally, this session will be closed by Claire Diaz-Ortiz from Twitter, another great example of peer-to-peer, this time on media, who will be talking about how Twitter can be used for good. First, Jonah. Very quick introduction. This is, have you heard of the Matrix? This is something that Jonah did way back in 2003. And it's been seen by I don't know how many millions of people. Jonah will talk about that. It's called The Matrix. And that's the guy behind it. And I want to focus on something that he says, which I think captures it all. He says, we see brands as episodic, interactive stories that put their audiences in the role of the hero. Just like great stories, the best brands stand for universally cherished values. They stir emotion and action, and they're built around a core insight about how the world works and how it can be just a little, or perhaps a lot better. So with that, over to Jonah.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
I've got theme music now. I never had theme music before. It's great. Let's see, where's my presentation? All right, so I think we all know that today's battle to be heard is more vicious and difficult than ever before. There's so much media out there that we as marketers have to compete with, and we're always looking for some way directly to our customers. And in the last couple of years, a new idea seems to have swept the world of marketing. We hear it almost everywhere, and it's suddenly a common theme through all marketers. The idea, of course, is storytelling. Now, this is an ancient idea, but it has seemed to come back with an incredible vengeance. Suddenly, it's understood that the price of admission for a brand to be heard is to tell a great story. Now, why is that? Why is suddenly storytelling so important? Well, that's what we're going to be exploring over the next couple days. That's why we've gathered from around the world. And I want to give you some how-tos on how to turn your brand into a great story. And there's going to be so many other speakers giving you those cutting-edge ways to do the same. But before we get into the how, let's just talk a minute for the why. Why are we all here? Why are stories suddenly so important? Well, to understand that, we need to take a giant step back in human history. See, human beings have always told stories. We've existed for 99.9% of our species' time on this planet in oral tradition societies. This is a time before writing, a time before we could record ideas, when a speaker would simply share an idea with an audience member. If the audience member found it compelling and interesting enough, they would pass it along and the idea would continue to thrive. Now, there have been many, many thousands of oral tradition societies, but they all share a few common elements. First of all, this is a survival of the fittest landscape. If your idea is not sufficiently compelling, it won't get passed along and it will simply die. Transmission of these ideas move through webs and social networks. You don't contain the idea and own it. You pass it on and hope that your audience members find it so attractive that they make it their own. Now, for the past 100 years or so, we turned the oral tradition on its head. We entered the broadcast era, and here almost everything is the opposite. It's no longer survival of the fittest in the broadcast era. Now it's survival of the richest. If you can pay to get on television or to blast your ad out through billboards and radio, your message will simply get heard. We don't move through these social networks and webs anymore because we own the idea and we blast it out to millions. And ideas aren't owned by our audiences. We don't need to partner with them. The ideas belong simply to us as marketers. Now, we all know with the advent of social media and all the new tools that are letting audiences find each other and communicate in peer-to-peer ways, that broadcast era is coming to an end. Our audiences are skipping our broadcast messages. They're looking for information from trusted sources. So what's going to come next? What comes after the broadcast era? Well, I believe that our next era looks so much like oral traditions that what we might call the new era is the digitoral era, a digitally empowered version of the oral tradition. We as marketers now know it's a survival of the fittest landscape again. We can't guarantee attention from millions of viewers simply by paying for it. We know that we need our audiences to pick up our ideas and transmit them through their own webs, through their own social networks. We recognize that when we put a message out there, it's not canned, it's not fixed. Our audiences will comment on it, rate it, change it, mash it up. We are returning to an oral tradition. So we should ask ourselves, what type of information survives in the oral tradition? And the answer to that is so easy to say, because the answer has always been the same. From oral tradition societies, the only thing that remains on this planet from those societies is their trash, their pottery shards that we can dig up, and of course, their stories. Now, as Peter says, this is not exactly something new. Marketers have always told stories. But the stories of the past were contained. You could tell your story in a little 30-second spot, and that could be the story you tell for an entire year. Not anymore. Now our stories will unfold beginning perhaps on YouTube, get picked up and continued by our audiences on Twitter, unfold in person as we meet and give brand experiences. Our audiences will be retold by our fans and even our detractors. So our stories will become unfolding epics, not simple little anecdotes contained in 30-second spots. We must start to think of our entire brand as a story. And that's what I've been thinking about for the last couple of years. And I think there's a way to do it, because in the future, the best brands won't just tell great stories, they will be great stories. Now, looking for ways to do that, I turned to one of my personal heroes, Joseph Campbell. This guy knew more about the oral tradition than almost anybody else. Why? Well, he studied as many cultures as he possibly could across as many millennia as he could. And what he was looking for in these ancient myths was a single theme, some kind of pattern that made stories survive. He wanted to know if humanity in our DNA tended to share certain stories. And of course, he did find one. He called it the hero's journey. And it's the foundation for some of our favorite, most iconic media. The Wizard of Oz is based on the hero's journey. And Star Wars was written, shot for shot, scene for scene, based on this theme of the hero's journey. I think we can leverage this powerful concept to start turning our brands into stories, stories that will resonate over time and across all different audience types. And I want to take you through this hero's journey for a moment so you can understand how to start building your brand as a story. So the hero's journey goes something like this. There's a broken world. Things are out of balance. Things are out of whack, and we have a helpless outsider. This is often an orphan, or maybe an old man, or a slave who is trapped in this world where she's having trouble connecting to her deeper values because there's a villain out there. The dark side of the Force is taking over the galaxy, for instance, in Star Wars. She's going through this broken world believing she can't really change anything because she is so helpless. And then suddenly, she meets a mentor. This is Obi-Wan Kenobi for Star Wars fans, or Morpheus for those of us who like The Matrix. And this mentor says that so much more is possible in the hero's life. The mentor says, you can live out your highest values. You can heal the world, but it's going to be dangerous. You have to go on a quest of self-discovery and slay the dragon, kill the force that is destroying our universe right now, and create a better world. And the hero says, no, not me, I could never do that. But then the mentor gives the hero a magic gift, something that makes that dangerous journey feel possible. And because the magic gift so excites the hero, and because the hero comes to have a deep personal relationship with the mentor, the hero accepts the journey. She journeys into this magic world, and she confronts the source of the world's brokenness. And she seizes a treasure. But this treasure is not some gold that makes her rich and famous. This treasure is something she returns to use to heal the world. Now, Campbell said that we love these stories so much because we love the story of an outsider, of an unlikely hero who does something very difficult and lives out her higher values. Why? Because the moral of this story is that we all can be heroes. The moral of this story is that we all have something important to contribute to society. Campbell said this was almost an initiation process that helped the young and helpless teenager grow up to become a mature member of their society. It was based on a common theme that all human beings love. It's a common theme that we can use to make our brands iconic. Now let's talk about how we do that. Well, first to do that, we have to understand what a story is. And I think providing a context for what a story is will help you see everything from here on out in the next couple of days. You'll be able to use it a little bit more deeply because we'll have a definition of story. On this story, in a story, we find the surface, the characters, the conflict, the setting that we're all familiar with. We see the characters in a movie, for instance, and we recount what we saw. That's the surface of the story. Of course, just looking at the surface of something rarely gives us all we need to know. In a great story, everything put on the surface of the story will be there for a specific reason, to illustrate a core truth about how the universe works, something that audiences will nod their head and agree with, but also will stretch their knowledge, give them a deeper understanding of our world. Imagine if your brand could identify a simple, timeless truth about human nature, a timeless truth about life on this planet, that it could defend through every Twitter communication, every 30-second ad, every interaction with its audiences. This provides brand consistency, and we can start building our brands like stories by defending and identifying a clear and simple moral. But the moral of the story is based on something even deeper, and those are the core values that the moral is based on. The core values are why stories are so important, why children climb onto their parents' laps and ask to be told stories. They want to know what their parents value. It's why societies are built on stories. It's human beings' way of sharing core values. So I could tell you a story, and the moral of the story might be, he who hesitates is lost. Lots of stories have that moral. And that means that I value risk and adventure and high reward. I could tell you another story, better safe than sorry. That means I value something different, safety and security. The best brands will be based on higher human values like the hero's journey that tell us that we can rise up and be something more. In fact, even in the broadcast era, the most iconic brands called us to be heroes. Nike, for instance, while other brands told you, we'll make it safe and simple. If you just use our product, we'll do it for you. Nike said no. Achievement is only possible through hard work. Everything you need is already inside of you, so just do it. It's a hero's journey story unfolding in a brand. In the US, Obama in 2008, when other candidates would say, I will fix this country for you, Obama said, no, the hard work is within us. Let's join together in community. Let's work together because only you can fix this country. And obviously, he built the most iconic campaign brand of all time. Apple did the same with its 1984 ad, telling users that computers were not machines that would make their lives simpler and easier and do the work for them. They told them, this machine is a tool of your own self-expression. You are the hero of the story. We are only here to help. As brands, we need to think about what those core human values are that we stand for and defend them with every single story we tell. And not use those old values of the old marketing language of safety and security and convenience, but really call on our audiences to contribute something more, to dig deeper and become part of a larger unfolding story in society. So those are the two bases of any story. But the hero's journey provides us a few more tools that we can use as a foundation for a strategy for our brands. First of all, the hero's journey always has a hero. And this hero is not the person who has all the knowledge about the world that they'll be adventuring in. This hero is not the insider, it's the outsider. So what does that mean? We are not the heroes of our own brand stories. So many times we sit down to write our stories and we talk about how our product or service can be the hero in the lives of our audiences. In the digital age, that will be seen as broadcast advertising and will not be passed along. The best stories will cast their audiences in the role of hero. We'll recognize that our audiences are somehow dissatisfied with the broken world and will help them connect to their deeper values. Starting from a place of talking about ourselves means death in the digital era. Talking about our audiences as the stars of our stories provides us with a strategic framework that will allow us to break through. So if we're not the hero of the story, well, who are we? Well, the character left is the mentor. The mentor is the character that connects the hero to their deeper values and gets them moving towards their destiny, that tells them so much more is possible in life. If we turn our brands into mentors, we can get people moving towards action in the way great stories always have. In the broadcast age, we could frighten our audiences, tell them that they had to make the change was mandatory and they had to go out and do it. But in the old stories, in the mythic stories, the mentor never forced the hero to go on the adventure. The mentor makes change appealing. The mentor makes the adventure exciting and feel like something that the hero wants to do. Instead of threatening our audiences with how unsafe and poor they will be if they don't choose to evangelize our stories, we need to make that journey exciting and full of adventure for them. And also we need to realize that the audience only moves to action when they have a deep and personal relationship with the mentor. You see, in the old days, in the broadcast era, we could boom at our audiences in the voice of God, some kind of detached voice that told them what to do. But now in the digital era, we need to take on true human voices. Remember that Luke goes on the adventure in Star Wars because he has a deep personal connection with Obi-Wan Kenobi. He knows him in a personal voice. And our audiences need to see us as characters, not as organizations, not as companies, but as characters that they can have an emotional and personal relationship with. We use the idea of brand archetypes, which can be enormously powerful, to say if we were a human being as a brand, what human being will we be? How can we create a deep and emotional connection with our audiences by being a person rather than a company? And of course, the mentor gives the audience and the hero a gift, something magical, something creative and beautiful, something that makes this dangerous journey feel actually possible. Where other brands may be calling heroes to work for their values and to live out a better life, we need to figure out what is that core gift that as a brand we have that no one else has. What makes that dangerous adventure possible? In 2008, Obama was this outside candidate in the United States. Nobody thought that an African American could become president. But they loved his story. They loved his values. They loved his call to adventure. And then they introduced the brand gift, the internet. Obama understood the internet better than anyone else, and suddenly people came to believe. They believed so much more was possible, and they joined the campaign en masse. As we build out our stories, we need to figure out a logical progression from our values to our moral to who we are as mentors, and then we need that creative wild card, something that makes people believe this adventure is truly possible with this brand. These are the 5 elements that any brand can use to start creating a strategic framework. We can build every communication to support a core truth about how the world works. We can advertise our values and connect with our customers' values, making sure we live out those values in every single interaction, knowing that our audiences will be looking for hypocrisy, knowing that if we declare our values, we must live them out through every stage of our interactions with our audiences and even within the brand ourselves. This can be a powerful focusing agent to help our brands become more values-based and more relevant, a key attribute in the digital era. We can recognize that we're not the heroes of our own stories, but our audiences are, and that we are the mentors calling them to a dangerous and exciting adventure to do something great for the world, and giving them a special gift, something that differentiates ourselves from our competitors and making this whole thing seem possible. This is a framework also that can turn traditional marketing on its head. You see, in the broadcast era, we had a simple inadequacy approach that we used to reach our audiences. We told them that the world was dangerous. We told them, the consumer, that they were the damsel in distress. They were the character that needed help, needed to be saved, and that we as the brand would be the hero. We would come and save the day, protecting them from a world of anxiety. Not only did this build the kind of marketing that I don't think will be successful when people decide what they pass along, it also built a society of somewhat depressed and disengaged citizens. It made us think that to be a consumer was to be a good citizen. Our world of the future will require millions of citizens rising up and taking control of their own lives in participation with our brands, telling our stories with us and for us, and spreading them around the world in ways that we cannot yet imagine. That's going to take a different storytelling language. That's going to take the storytelling language that has always worked for human beings. So we need to move from inadequacy marketing to what I call empowerment marketing, letting our audiences understand that a deeper connection with their values is possible and that they can be heroes. I explore all of these ideas and more in my book, Winning the Story Wars, and I invite you to go deeper by downloading a free piece of it and learning more about how you can create new kinds of marketing that will create digitorily ready communications and create your entire brand as a story so you'll be heard now and deep into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonah. Thank you. Could I have my computer on, please? Jonah, quick question for you. I'm a big fan of The Matrix. Did The Matrix follow the same kind of principles of storytelling?
Yeah, absolutely. So The Matrix was a movie that we made to talk about the problems with factory farming, with industrial farming, and where our food came from. And at the time, what we wanted to do was try to reach whole new audiences. People were not interested in the issue because they didn't really want to know where their food came from if the truth wasn't interesting and what they wanted to hear. So we decided to use a sort of mythic storytelling language, and we knew that The Matrix was a typical hero's journey story, so we decided to sort of base our movie on The Matrix itself. And that was a story that had been so resonant with people around the world, we thought we could use that formula and kind of test it out. Just in the same way that George Lucas decided to test the hero's journey when he wrote Star Wars, we wanted to test it again by applying a social issue to the Matrix. And so we put those two things together, and an issue that no one wanted to hear about suddenly became a viral sensation. I think we reached about 30 million people almost immediately with the message, and it was a message that no one could break through with, and reached audiences well beyond the people who usually talk about it, because we were using mythic language. I talk a lot in the book about some of the other elements and how we created specific characters and created specific conflicts to make it go viral as well. But yeah, that was proof to me that these concepts really work.
Fantastic. You know, I've heard clients so many times say to me, let's do a viral campaign.
Yeah.
And I don't think that people understand that, you know, it's not an accident that things go viral. It's because it's got certain ingredients inside there.
Yeah.
And I guess if you analyze the stuff that really does it on the web, it's always got those elements inside there, no?
I think that's true. There are definitely patterns that we can find in things that go viral. But I think there's also a problem with going viral as a strategy. We have made lots of movies that have reached tens of millions of people in which the client ultimately realizes that the whole thing was a mistake because they didn't really know what their own brand story was, so they just put it in our hands to make something. We make it, the audiences love it.
So in other words, going viral for the sake of going
viral. It's going viral for the sake of going viral. And that's why what I talked about today is really giving yourself a sort of framework to understand, is this story appropriate for my brand? Will this resonate or will this just get attention? And I think so often we jump as marketers to how do we get heard, how do we go viral, without figuring out, well, what are we trying to defend here? How is our brand a story? And then how do we deploy specific stories to support that larger brand story? It is a huge mistake to deploy stories without knowing what your core story is. And that's why really a lot of what I like to talk about is the strategic element before getting into the tactical element.
I think for me that is probably, you know, the critical thing. If you can strategize the messages that actually are picked up by consumers and go out there and become big and go viral, you've done a lot, because going viral for the sake of going viral certainly is not a strategy. Something that I took from what you said, the hero is not you, it's your audience, and your brand is a mentor. That is so different from that old kind of stuff that we used to do during the broadcast era, when we made our products and our brands heroes. Huge difference.
Well, you know, Dale Carnegie, who you mentioned, would never tell someone to walk into a party and start talking about themselves and how great they were. You know, you make a connection by talking to your audiences and talking about who they are. And if we think about the fact that we need our audiences to not just listen to what we say, but to pick it up and make it their own, we need to be talking about them rather than ourselves.
Fantastic, great advice. I would strongly recommend Jonah's book. I think that understanding the basic principles of storytelling and being able to strategize your messaging in that open environment called social networks is hugely valuable. Thank you so much, Jonah.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. Next speaker. First,